Join me, 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty, on my podcast, My Life of Crime, as I take on true crime investigations like no other. This season, I'm looking into the labyrinth of crime and secrets within families. I'm cutting straight to the evidence and talking to the people directly involved, including investigators and the families of victims. Listen to My Life of Crime with Erin Moriarty wherever you get your podcasts.
Brooks Running has a new shoe for you runners out there. Did you hear that? Better turn up your volume. In fact, turn it up to the max. Introducing the all-new Ghost Max. It's got all kinds of things to make your knees and ankles feel protected, like Max Cushion, Max Soft Landings with DNA Loft V2 foam, and Max Smooth Rides with their Glide Roll Rocker. Feel better on your run with Ghost Max. Learn more at brooksrunning.com.
This is Central Texas Living with Ann Harder.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ann Harder. Welcome to Central Texas Living, the podcast. In Central Texas is a significant archaeological site, one that you may never have heard of, and we're going to change that right now. Joining me is Dr. Clark Wernecke with the Gault School of Archaeological Research. It's located near the Bell and Williamson County line, kind of near Florence.
Yep.
And it is an amazing thing. It's one of my favorite stories we've done for Traveling Texas with Ann Harder, because I was able to come there and see this significant site, and it has kind of changed how people are being taught in colleges, at least, about the origins of humans in Central Texas.
Yeah, that's true. We had all been taught as kids that, these half-naked guys were running around Siberia 13,500 years ago, and they came to a bridge that connects Siberia to Alaska, and they ran across it, and then they came to a 3-mile-high wall of ice, and apparently it miraculously parted. I always imagine, Charlton Heston on top with a multicolored robe and a big stick, and there's a 2,000-mile-long passageway between them, and they ran through there, and they were kind of an Asian biker gang, and they killed everything they came across until 37 large animals became extinct. So I add a little sarcasm and Charlton Heston to that, and it sounds ridiculous.
Well, it kind of does. But there wasn't really a thinking that people were coming thousands and thousands of years ago. I mean, originally we thought it was the Clovis people, and that was 14,000 years ago was the earliest.
Well, we thought that Clovis, which is about 12,700 to 13,500 years ago, represented those first people. When we're talking about something like Clovis, it's a culture, so it's stuff. It's not people. It's their garbage. But people were using very specific techniques to make stone tools and other things at the time. Think of the avocado appliance culture. Nobody wants to admit that they were a member of that, but the avocado appliance culture became the harvest. They became the harvest gold appliance culture.
Yeah, okay.
So it's the same thing. We're looking at it through things.
Right.
That's the only way we can get to human behavior in the past.
So let's go back to the Gault story. Gentleman named Henry Gault owned this property back turn of the century, 1900-ish, and he's trying to farm that not very good land, but trying to farm it near Buttermilk Creek, right?
Yeah,
that's the name of the little creek, and started finding all these arrowheads. I mean, lots of arrowheads, apparently.
Well, lots of all kinds of tools.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a major manufacturing site, and was for a long time. And Henry wasn't a real collector. His land, though, was being looted very early on. The first archaeologist in Texas, J.E. Pierce, was the first one to go out to Henry's land. Henry invited him to take a look there in 1929, and they did some excavations. But a friend of J.E. Pierce's from up here in Waco, Kenneth Ainsworth, who started the Texas collection at the Baylor,
really
at Baylor University,
great
actually went down there in 1930 and said that when he went down into the field, there were a couple of guys digging a hole. There were already people looting the site. So there was about 90 years of looting and collecting there.
Well, and some of it was kind of a cottage industry. You'd pay a little money
Sure.
and you could go out and get a shoebox full of
Yeah,
whatever.
later on there was a pay-to-dig site. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, so it's a relatively short period of time when you think about it that area has really been studied seriously.
Well, J. Pierce looked at it for 6 weeks in 1929, brought back 3,333 artifacts. I don't know why it's such an interesting number, but pronounced upon it at his desk. That was the earliest archaeology in Texas. We didn't know much about archaeology in the West outside of Puebloan sites at the time. And then it languished for a long time and wasn't looked at again until 1991. So even though we knew this site existed, between all the looting and collecting, we thought that it had been pretty much completely destroyed.
Yeah, but it truly had not.
No, most of the people that were working on the site were digging relatively shallow holes.
Right.
In interviews with a lot of them, the folks that knew more about the archaeology of Central Texas knew there was a chance of something deeper down. But if they just paid $25 to dig a hole, if they dig a wide, shallow hole when there were more people here in Central Texas, in the more recent, archaeology, then they're going to go home with a shoebox full of stuff for $25. If they dig a deep, narrow hole, they may go home with nothing. So because of that and the fact that a lot of people are digging these holes in the summer, when you don't really want to be digging a large hole in Central Texas, they're digging relatively shallow holes and, in effect, protecting the older archaeology.
So that was a benefit of that. Let's talk about the different people groups that lived here, from the most recent to the furthest back that you've discovered.
Well, most recently in this area, you had the Comanche.
Right.
Before them, you had the Apache. They were kind of pushed out of the way by the Comanche. Before that, you had the Waco and Tawakoni and a number of the Caddoan peoples, Hasinai, Wichita, folks like that were down in this area. And before that, we don't know because we don't know the names. You know, the names we get, particularly for Native American groups, are usually not their names, first of all. They're the names that other people gave them, usually their neighbors who didn't like them. So many of them
Call
are not
them
very
something.
nice names. And, of course, the Spanish, wrote those all down when they got here. So we have a whole series of names for peoples, not necessarily their name for themselves. But prior to that, we really only have the stuff they left behind. And we can't tell all the time if that's one people or a number of people. Think of the iPod culture or, the iPhone culture, since I'm old enough to remember iPods and they're already history. But, you could go in the furthest reaches of Western China and find somebody with an iPhone. The stuff on their iPhone and the stuff on your iPhone is probably going to be quite different. But you'd both hold up your phone and go, hey.
Yeah, we got one.
So
yeah.
finding an iPhone or a Coke bottle or can or something like that from popular culture doesn't necessarily tell you there's different people there. You have to put all the things together that you find, all the clues, just like a good murder mystery, and try to determine what happened there. And clues all put together in a whole will tell you more about what might have gone on there and might be able to distinguish between one group and another.
So what you originally thought was 13,500 years ago were the first people that came here. But you dug deeper and found 20,000 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
Now, that's a big discovery.
And we didn't expect that.
Yeah.
Gault was a lot of surprises. I mean, when we first got out to Gault, first thing we found were these incised stones with geometric designs incised in them, the oldest of which at Gault are actually the oldest dated art in the Americas.
That's incredible.
And we found a mammoth mandible, the lower jaw of a juvenile female Columbian mammoth, and some of the other bones from her, surrounded by 22 butchering tools and a Clovis point, so a probable mammoth kill site,
Really?
of which there's only about 17 known in the Americas. Then we had 2.6 million artifacts from about 3% of the site. That was a big surprise. That's just an extraordinary amount of data. And we've had 600,000 Clovis artifacts, which is one of the largest, conglomerations of Clovis artifacts in the nation. It's one of the largest data sets we have to look at. And then when we were doing test units out there to show other archaeologists the site, we found archaeology below the Clovis strata.
Well,
Stuff that was between...
Who started digging then? I mean, when did that happen?
Well, we actually did 3 test units because one of the largest gatherings of archaeologists in the world, the Society for American Archaeology, was going to be in Austin for the very first time ever. So we were going to bring busloads of archaeologists to the site to show them that stratigraphy. And you dig down and you dig. I was taught you dig until you hit bedrock, water, or it's unsafe to dig. Mm-hmm. And so we dug all the way down to the underlying bedrock, which we really hadn't done very often there. We'd gotten into all this archaeology and slowed down by that. And we found all this stuff way down at the bottom above that bedrock. And it dates between 16 and 20,000 years ago.
And that just upends what the textbooks had said.
Yeah, it's significantly older. Now we have a handful of sites that were found prior to this: Monteverde in Chile, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, Cactus Hill in Virginia, sites like that had older dates. But each time one of those found, people go, well, I don't know. But when you start getting more and more of these sites, there's so much data that eventually you have to change your ideas and say, well, I wasn't sure about the dating on that site. I wasn't sure about the artifacts on that site, but now there's 10 or 12 of them. There's enough smoke that there's fire. So you have to change your ideas. And while Gault isn't the oldest site, it's falling right in with a number of the other ones. So just a couple of weeks ago, there was a publication about a site at White Sands, New Mexico, where they have Pleistocene animals, including mammoths and giant sloth, and human footprints. And they were able to get a date from some plant material in that soil, and it's 23,000 years old. And a colleague of ours who worked at Gault, Dr. Cyprian Argeline, published last summer in Nature magazine about a Chicohuite cave in Zacatecas, Mexico, where they have 26,000-year-old dates. So I've been getting calls from people saying, what do you think of those dates? Like, I'm delighted. Because,
it's showing.
We got 20, 23, 26, 22, we're starting to see patterns.
Right. So you have to have a pattern. I mean, you've got this one site there at Gault that I think is interesting. It's filled back in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you dug and you found it, and you found basically what, the floor of a house? Is that what you found?
We have the floor of the oldest excavated house in North America. It's at least 12,700 years old.
But it's been covered over.
Yeah, it's in a floodplain. There's no way for me to protect it,
to preserve it,
unless somebody with a lot of money is listening to this podcast and has a good checkbook and wants to write a check.
Well, there's other things we need that money for.
So we could do.
We'll be back to you about the money. But I mean, you would have taken millions of dollars to build some sort of facility and so forth. But what you have to do now is find another place, necessarily around here or not.
Archaeologists are interested in patterns of human behavior. We're not actually interested in artifacts or filling in museum cases or filling in the gaps in your history books. We're looking at human behavior in the past. Sociocultural anthropologists look at it in the present, and we're trying to model human behavior in the future. So we're not so much about where we were as we are about where we're going. And that's what we really need. But to be able to look at human behavior, what you really need in a broad scale is patterns of human behavior. That's what cultures are. When we talk about the Clovis culture, it's not a people, it's a pattern of behavior. So
what's involved in the Clovis behavior?
Well, and the further back you go, the less data you have. So Clovis is an awful lot of stone tool technology and a tiny bit of wood and bone that have been found. But we don't get, we get indications, for instance, that they had mats and baskets and clothing and bags. We just don't get the preservation on that. We can see the tools they had for making those things, which gives us clues. So, if it's a historical site, you might have a written account of it, and you'd have a whole bunch of things laying around, and you'd pick it up. I had one guy who worked for me who'd pick up a beer can tab, and he could tell you, because those actually changed through time, he'd tell you, oh, this was made between 1963 and 1967, things like that.
Yeah.
So we take all those things and we look for those patterns of behavior. Clovis is one of those patterns. And you can't use one site to form a pattern. One site is just a data point. So we're constantly looking for other sites here in Texas to try and find out what's going on there. And we work with other researchers throughout this hemisphere.
Yeah. And of course, you told me that there have been several. I mean, you're always looking for these sites. You're always.
Constantly, yeah. I mean, here in Texas, it's a little more difficult. First of all, 99% of the land in Texas is privately owned, and we have to be invited in.
But folks do contact you.
Yeah, we don't have any superpowers, so we can't take land or artifacts away from people.
Yeah.
So
No.
usually people contact a friend of a friend of a friend, and they say, who can we trust? And then they get in touch with us. And we have lots of people send us pictures. They'll text us or email us pictures of things and say, I found this in my backyard. What is that? And the more eyes out there looking, the better it is for us. We tell people, just please make sure they're in focus. I get a lot of really fuzzy brown pictures, and I got to say, can you take some more pictures?
Anybody's
It
guess.
might be a rock. No.
All right, Dr. Clark Wernecke, we're going to come back. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll hear more about his work at the Gault School of Archaeological Research. Stay with us.
Hey, I'm April,
Hey, I'm Caroline, and this is Bloody Happy Hour.
your newest true crime comedy podcast.
So grab your favorite drink and join us every week for Thirsty Thursday.
We promise to tell you the bloodiest stories and give you a laugh in between. Go find us, follow us, and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, because guess what?
We're about to be sipping on some murder.
F-Bomb. This is Mandy and the F-Bomb, where we shed light on stories and invite you to find your place and purpose in the world of foster care. Through my involvement with families involved in foster care and being a foster mom myself, I've learned that it's the things that wreck us the most profoundly that can stitch us back together into the best, purpose-filled versions of ourselves. Tune in to Mandy and the F-Bomb. It's stories that invite you in to find your place and purpose in the world of foster care. You can find us anywhere you get podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing.
Brooks Running has a new shoe for you runners out there. Did you hear that? Better turn up your volume. In fact, turn it up to the max. Introducing the all-new Ghost Max. It's got all kinds of things to make your knees and ankles feel protected, like Max Cushion, Max Soft Landings with DNA Loft V2 foam, and Max Smooth Rides with their Glide Roll Rocker. Feel better on your run with Ghost Max. Learn more at brooksrunning.com.
And we're back with Dr. Clark Wernecke, who's the executive director. Is that the right title?
Yep,
At
executive director.
At the Gault School of Archaeological Research, and it's there in the Williamson County, kind of close to Williamson and Bell County line on some property, beautiful property out there. It was a private farm, and then it was kind of bought and preserved. Let's talk about that exact site and why ancient peoples thought that'd be a good place to settle.
Well, Henry Gault sold the farm in the 1940s. The family that bought it actually eventually invited us in to look at something there and decided that perhaps it was too important for them to own. So we went and talked to an awful lot of people to try to raise the money. We were actually unable to raise the money. Everybody would say, oh my gosh, this is really important. This is like a national cultural treasure. I can't help you.
Yeah.
So Dr. Michael Collins, who's the chairman emeritus of the Gault School of Archaeological Research, actually dipped into his retirement savings and purchased the land himself, and then donated it to the Archaeological Conservancy, which is a nonprofit that protects some 500 archaeological sites nationwide. And the Gault School owns some land around it, and we administer and maintain the site for the Conservancy.
And you work sort of in collaboration with University of Texas?
Well, we have an office down at the University of Texas, and we have a project that we fund at the University of Texas called the Prehistory Research Project that enables our scientific staff members to get benefits and so on. So, yeah.
Well, the area there, when we got to come and do our television segment with you, it's beautiful, but you said, you came to Texas in the summer, and you wonder, why would anybody want to settle here? But there were definite reasons.
Yeah, it's, first of all, the Edwards Plateau, which we think of as a very dry place, is where much of the water in Texas comes from. It's where 4 of our major river systems start. The 15 largest springs in Texas are on the Edwards Plateau. So it's dry near the surface, but it's a giant sponge filled with water. And so even at the Gault site, we have 6 springs that run pretty much all the time. In a wet year, we counted 32.
Really?
So water is one of the important reasons why people are coming to the edge of the Edwards Plateau. It's also what's known as an ecotone. It's where environments transition into one another. So a short distance away is the Blackland Prairie, the coastal plains, down near I-35.
Waco and
those deep farms and everything. And we're actually at the conjunction of the Balcones Canyonlands, the Edwards Plateau proper, and the Lampasas Cut Plains to the north. And then the valley that Buttermilk Creek is in is completely different from everything around it. We tell people on tours it's kind of like living between, in the alley between H-E-B, Randall's, Lowe's, and Home Depot. Pretty much everything you could want is there.
Yeah.
There's also ancient trade routes that go through there.
Now that's fascinating because there is a stone that's right under the Edwards limestone, right, called Chert?
Chert.
Yeah, tell them about that.
Chert has got a fancy name. It's called a cryptocrystalline silicate. It's a stone made of silica crystals. It's akin to quartz. Opal, chalcedony, jasper are also cherts, as is flint. Flint is a type of chert that's formed in chalk. And the Edwards Plateau, which is about 34,000 square miles, is ancient seabed. That's where you get all those little marine fossils in there. It is the largest source of chert in North America. We find Edwards Plateau chert more than 1,500 miles away archaeologically. I'm convinced it's probably further than that. It's just that archaeologists further away than that probably have no idea what they're looking at and write their reports and say, I have an unknown chert
I don't know
source.
what it is, yeah.
We've only recently developed a way to kind of fingerprint that. So people are looking at that as well. But
so the people living there, they were trading this
They're trading
stone.
the rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and today people still trade the rock.
You said that's
it's worth $3.50 a pound on eBay and Craigslist.
So you got it on your property.
Modern flint knappers still pay a premium for Edwards chert. It's one of the finest materials you can make stone tools out of. It's stronger than steel. It breaks in a predictable fashion with a razor sharp edge.
So perfect for making tools.
Yeah.
Or implements for killing things. And there at the Gault site is what's called a midden. It was like a big, explain what that was. We were standing on this and you could just pick up these bits of chert that were, you said it was garbage or leftovers or refuse from what they had been.
Yeah, there are several middens actually out of Gault. And
Uh-huh.
midden's just a fancy academic word for garbage heap.
Garbage heap.
That's basically what it is. Primarily, people out there were processing food in these large semi-underground ovens. One of the foods they processed was basically just a flower bulb from the area. And it really needs to be transformed in heat. Otherwise, it's something that your body can't process very well. So people are building these ovens and building a big fire in them, then putting the food in there, putting grass and leaves and stuff over it, and then the dirt over it, and wait about 30 hours. So you got to cook it to change its chemical properties. And then when they do that, these ovens get very, very hot. The stones you line them with break up under the heat. Limestone breaks up under high heat into just fragments. You have the remains of the fire. You have the remains of the plant tops that you got rid of, the stuff that you put over it, the grass and weeds you put over it when you closed it up. You probably have a bunch of hearths around it because watching a bunch of smoking piles of dirt for 30 hours is pretty dull. So people are cooking food and they're manufacturing tools while they're sitting there waiting for this to be done. So you build up quite a big pile of debris, including tools and tool fragments, which is why a lot of collectors look for middens.
Mm-hmm. And when I was out there, I had one in my hand. I said, "Can I take this home?" And you said, "No, you may not."
No, it is on the National Register,
Right.
and it is a state antiquities landmark. And
Yeah.
you can't take things from an archaeological site like that. It actually, everything that leaves that site changes the story a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Just like any good murder mystery, you think one person did it throughout the whole mystery, and then they find that cigarette butt, and it's obvious it was somebody else.
Yeah.
One artifact can make quite a difference.
Well, you've told me the activities of these people based on what you've found. And then they would take this cooked bulb. I think it's remarkable they figured this out. Number one, that people could figure out they needed to do this. And then they'd grind it into a flour, right?
Yeah, you could grind it into a flour. You can make a flatbread out of it. You could use it as a thickener in a stew.
And then if it got wet.
Well, if it got wet and they left it hanging around, it probably fermented. And everybody sooner or later figures out fermentation. So, somebody just says, wow, that stuff was really tangy and he's been acting like an idiot all afternoon. We need more of that,
All that from this just pile of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what brought you to Central Texas? Tell me about your background, Dr. Wernecke.
Well, actually, I started out way up north in Wisconsin, but I'm not very enamored of cold weather, so I moved south as fast as I possibly could. I actually majored in history and took a lot of archaeology as an undergraduate, but at the time, the only jobs available were actually in academia, and there aren't too many of those. And basically, people stay in them until they keel over dead.
Yeah, right.
So there weren't really any job opportunities. So I actually went into business for a number of years. I actually got an MBA and was in the lumber and building materials business for a long time. I was doing consulting and living in Florida at the time. And of course, in an economic downturn, the first person to go is the consultant. So I was sitting around at home, and I don't sit very well. And some friends of mine said, "You never shut up about archaeology. There's a school less than a mile from you that teaches archaeology. Why don't you look at that?" So I actually went back and got my master's and PhD in archaeology. And with my MBA, I organized large projects. Actually, prior to coming to Texas, I worked for 9 years on Amaya City.
Yeah, so you've got quite a range of experience.
Yeah, which is kind of unusual in archaeology because normally as a student, you're pushed to focus on a time period, a particular culture, or a particular geographical area.
And you sort of stick with that.
Yeah, well, because I was going back to school as an older adult, I don't take pushing very well either. But also the fact is that all archaeology is actually business. It's fundraising and accounting and logistics and personnel. And they don't teach archaeologists how to do any of that. So I had an opportunity to be able to do that for large archaeological projects.
Yeah, perfect fit for the Gault School. You do raise money, and I know there is a project, a video project, a film. In fact, should I call it a film or a video?
It'll be a film.
It's going to be a film. And let's talk a little bit about that because there is it's going to be a crowdfunded thing, or they're still working, trying to
Basically, they're still raising the money, yeah. And it was a person came to us, Olive Talley. She's a 3-time Emmy nominee. She really knows what she's doing with this, has done some really remarkable work. And she said she actually learned about it from somebody on a trip she was taking in Antarctica, of all places. And a guy was talking about this incredible stuff in Texas. And she said, "I'm from Texas. What are you talking about?"
Well, kind of like me. I've never heard of this place.
So she came out and talked to us and got very enamored of it and said, I really would like to do this film project. And so we've been cooperating with that now for some time.
And there's a trailer available.
There is a trailer.
Right, a Facebook location.
She has a webpage called gaultfilm.com with actually several trailers on there. There's a new one that just went up.
Yeah, I think you're featured in
one
of them.
I'm in there somewhere in the middle, yeah.
Well, and so she's got about 200,000 of the 600,000 they need to get this thing fully produced. And so we've included in our posting where you can go to that.
Yeah, she's
website
got some right now, some offers of matching grants.
That'd be great.
So, donations to her project actually get doubled
Yeah.
in the end run.
But you're no stranger to doing a lot of television interviews on this kind of thing. In fact, you even did one for Nova with Alan Alda.
Well, we did Scientific American Frontiers with Alan Alda, and we did a Nova show as well.
Oh, a Nova, okay.
And 5 shows for the BBC, and shows for Korean public television, and Japanese public television, and German public television. And
so it seems
so
like the
lots
whole
of
world
that
knows
sort of
about
thing,
the Gault site, but I
but
fear
the
a lot
people
of
that live
local people
closest-
really have not heard of it, and it is just fascinating, and it is a kind of place that you can go and visit. It's locked up tight. It's a private thing, but
we have monthly scheduled tours of the Gault site. There's actually a schedule of those on our events calendar on the first page of our website, which is gaultschool.org. And we will also schedule a tour for any group of 10 or more, calendar allowing. So we have school tours out there. We have master naturalist tours and history club tours and DAR ladies and Rotary clubs and you name it. So.
Yeah. Well, it is a fascinating trip. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time out there with you because it's sort of unexpected in a way that it's even there, and they've been able to find so much information out from that bit of property there. The Williamson County Museum and the Bell County Museum both kind of work to help schedule and coordinate some trips out there.
Yeah, they
as well.
organize those monthly tours. We give them, but they organize them for us.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful thing, and you're still busy. I mean, it's still a work in progress. Obviously, you're still looking.
Yeah. Well, we're not looking at Gault.
Yeah,
excavating more at the Gault site would give us statistically more of the same.
Right.
So we are looking at usually about 10 to 15 sites here in Texas every year.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find other sites like it, similar dates, similar artifacts, similar geology, and we have volunteers that actually sign up to work on that. There's some 300, I think, on the call-out list right now of people who always wanted to get their hands dirty. And we have volunteers in our lab as well. And our website has a tab right on the front page that says volunteer.
Oh, it's great. Your website is great. And of course, you've had a number of students, interns from UT, I guess, and you've got lots of PhDs that have come out of
We've
the
had
work there.
16 master's theses and 6 doctoral dissertations so far. There's several being worked on right now. We have 15 students and volunteers in our lab right now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it is wonderful work. And Dr. Wernecke, I cannot thank you enough for spending some time with us here to tell us more about the Gault School of Archaeological Research. And again, what is that website?
It's www.gaultschool.org.
Very good. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Central Texas Living is part of the Rogue Media Network family. Be sure to check out their other shows at roguemedianetwork.com. Please rate us 5 stars on iTunes and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Join us again soon for more Central Texas Living, the podcast.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.